Most people think winning means pushing harder, speaking louder, or proving they are stronger. But what if that belief is the very reason so many people feel exhausted, frustrated, and never truly at peace? There is an ancient idea that turns everything upside down. It says the strongest person is often the one who refuses to enter the fight at all. That sounds impossible until you begin to notice something hidden in your own life. Once you see it, you may never look at conflict the same way again. You wake up determined to have a peaceful day. Before breakfast is over, someone challenges your opinion. At work, a simple conversation turns into a quiet contest over who deserves the credit. On the drive home, another driver cuts in front of you, and your mind instantly prepares for a battle that may never happen. Even in moments of silence, the conflict continues. You replay old conversations, imagine future arguments, and rehearse victories against people who are not even present. By the time the day ends, your body feels tired, yet you have barely moved. Something has been fighting all day, but it was never your hands. It was your mind. Most of us never question this constant struggle because it feels normal. We have been taught that strength means standing our ground, proving our worth, and refusing to back down. Every disagreement becomes a test of character. Every criticism feels like an attack. Every setback demands resistance. Without realizing it, we begin measuring our lives by the number of battles we survive, rather than the peace we preserve. The strange part is that many of these battles have no clear enemy. A careless remark from a stranger lingers in our thoughts for hours. A harmless comparison steals our confidence. Someone else's success quietly becomes our failure. The conflict grows larger inside us than it ever existed in the outside world. We spend enormous energy defending an image of ourselves that no one else is thinking about as much as we are. There is a hidden comfort in fighting. It creates the feeling that we are in control. If we push harder, argue longer, or refuse to give in, we believe we are protecting something valuable. Yet force has an unusual appetite. The more we rely on it, the more it demands. Winning one argument only prepares us for the next. Defending one opinion makes us afraid to question it. The struggle never truly ends because it feeds on itself. Centuries ago, long before crowded cities and endless notifications, quiet observers noticed this pattern. They watched rulers exhaust kingdoms through endless conquest. They saw families divided over pride, and individuals consumed by the need to overcome every obstacle through sheer force. What fascinated them was not the conflict itself, but the invisible cost that followed it. Every unnecessary struggle left the spirit a little heavier, even when the battle was won. Perhaps the greatest illusion is believing that resistance is the same as strength. We admire those who never bend, yet we rarely ask what constant resistance is doing to them. A tree that refuses to move with the wind often breaks before one that quietly sways. Nature has always whispered this truth, but human ambition is usually too loud to hear it. And that raises a question so simple that it almost feels dangerous. If every fight leaves us weaker in ways we cannot immediately see, then why have we accepted struggle as the only path to victory? More importantly, what if the opponent standing in front of you was never the real problem at all? The moment someone tries to control you, something inside you begins to resist. It happens almost without thought. A parent demands obedience, and a child becomes stubborn. A manager insists on one way forward, and quiet resentment begins to grow. Even when advice is sincere, the harder it is forced upon us, the less willing we are to accept it. We often believe we are resisting the person in front of us, but more often we are reacting to the pressure itself. This quiet pattern shapes far more of our lives than we notice. Every argument becomes a contest of pressure. One voice grows louder, so the other refuses to soften. One person becomes more certain, so the other clings even tighter to their own position. Neither side is truly listening anymore. They are defending something invisible. What began as a simple disagreement slowly transforms into a struggle for identity. The human ego has a remarkable ability to confuse being right with being safe. Once our beliefs become part of who we think we are, any challenge feels personal. We stop asking whether something is true and start asking whether we can afford to lose. In that moment, the conversation is no longer about ideas. It becomes about survival, even when nothing meaningful is actually at risk. This is why force rarely ends conflict. It feeds it. Every attempt to overpower another person creates an equal desire to push back. The stronger the pressure, the stronger the resistance. It is not always expressed through anger. Sometimes it appears as silence, distance, passive defiance, or quiet withdrawal. The battle changes shape, but it continues all the same. The ancient Taoist masters observed this long before psychology gave it a name. They were not trying to build a religion or persuade people to adopt a new belief. They simply watched the world carefully. They noticed that nature never forced balance into existence. Day never argued with night. The seasons never competed for dominance. Every movement naturally invited another, and harmony emerged without struggle. Human beings, however, often believe they can command what nature gently allows. We try to control every outcome, every opinion, every relationship, and every uncertain future. Yet, the tighter we close our hands, the more life seems to slip through our fingers. We mistake control for security, unaware that our need to dominate is often creating the very opposition we fear. There is a quiet humility in recognizing this pattern. It does not mean becoming passive or allowing yourself to be mistreated. It means seeing that lasting influence is rarely born from pressure. The deepest changes in another person almost never happen because they were defeated. They happen because they no longer feel the need to defend themselves. That realization led Taoist thinkers toward an unexpected teacher. They stopped looking to kings, warriors, and conquerors for answers. Instead, they turned their attention to something far quieter. Something that seemed too ordinary to hold great wisdom. They watched water, and in its effortless movement, they discovered a way of overcoming obstacles that force could never achieve. Watch a river for long enough, and it begins to challenge everything you believe about strength. It never argues with the rocks that stand in its way. It never demands that the mountain move aside. It does not rush forward in frustration or retreat in defeat. It simply continues. Around a stone, beneath a fallen tree, through the smallest opening, it finds a path. What first appears to be weakness slowly reveals itself as something far more enduring. A single drop of water seems almost powerless. You can scatter it with your hand. Yet given enough time, that same water smooths jagged cliffs, carves deep valleys, and shapes landscapes that outlive entire civilizations. The rock appears strong because it resists. Water appears weak because it yields. But history tells a different story. The rock slowly breaks apart. The water keeps flowing. The Taoist sages looked at this quiet miracle and saw more than a feature of nature. They saw a pattern that reached into every part of human life. The world constantly praises those who force their way forward, who refuse to bend, who meet every obstacle with greater pressure. Yet nature keeps offering another example. The things that endure are often the things that know how to adapt. This does not mean avoiding difficulty or surrendering your values. Water never abandons its direction. It simply refuses to waste energy fighting what cannot be changed. When one path closes, another appears. Its purpose remains the same, but its movement changes. That quiet flexibility is not hesitation. It is intelligence expressed through patience. The Taoists described this way of living with a simple idea that later became known as Wu Wei. It is often misunderstood as doing nothing, when it is really about doing nothing unnecessary. It is action without strain, effort without conflict, movement that works with the natural shape of life instead of constantly pushing against it. The greatest results are often achieved not by forcing events to obey us, but by recognizing the direction in which they are already willing to move. Think about the people who leave the deepest impression on your life. They are rarely the loudest voices in the room. They do not need to dominate every conversation or win every disagreement. Their calm creates space for others to listen. Their confidence does not demand attention because it is not built on proving itself. Like water, their influence spreads quietly, yet it reaches places force never could. The same truth appears in leadership, in friendships, in families, and even in personal ambition. A leader who trusts instead of controlling often inspires greater loyalty. A friend who listens instead of overpowering builds stronger bonds. A person who adapts to change often reaches goals that stubborn determination alone could never achieve. Quiet influence has a way of lasting long after loud victories have been forgotten. Perhaps that is why this ancient lesson still feels surprising. We have spent so much of our lives believing that softness invites defeat. Yet water reminds us that gentleness and strength are not opposites. Sometimes they are the very same thing. If that is true, then another question naturally follows. Why do so many people continue choosing force, even after seeing again and again that it rarely brings the peace or success they are searching for? The quietest person in the room is not always the weakest. More often than we realize, they are the one who understands that every reaction comes with a cost. While others rush to defend themselves, they take a moment to observe. While voices rise, they remain steady. Their calm is not hesitation. It is a choice. And that choice quietly changes the direction of the entire conversation. Think about the conflicts that unfold in ordinary workplaces. A project falls behind, blame begins to circulate, and tension fills the room. One person interrupts, another becomes defensive, and before long the original problem is forgotten. The argument has become the focus, yet there is often someone who refuses to be pulled into that current. They listen carefully, speak only when their words can move the situation forward, and never allow another person's frustration to dictate their own state of mind. Without demanding authority, they often become the person everyone naturally follows. The same pattern appears in our closest relationships. When emotions are met with more emotion, small misunderstandings quickly become lasting wounds. Hurt answers hurt, and silence answers anger. But when one person remains present instead of reactive, something unexpected happens. The cycle begins to lose its momentum. A calm response does not guarantee agreement, but it creates space where understanding can finally appear. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is refusing to give conflict the energy it needs to survive. Leadership follows the same quiet law. Many believe influence comes from commanding others, correcting every mistake, or proving their superiority. Yet the leaders people remember most often possess a different quality. Their confidence does not depend on control. They create trust instead of fear. They inspire responsibility instead of demanding obedience. Because they are not consumed by protecting their own image, others feel safe enough to bring their best forward. Even personal ambition changes when viewed through this lens. There is a difference between pursuing a goal and battling the world to achieve it. One path is driven by purpose. The other is driven by constant resistance. The first allows setbacks to become lessons. The second turns every obstacle into an enemy. One preserves energy. The other slowly exhausts it. This is the quiet power Taoist wisdom points toward. It is not the power to dominate another person. It is the freedom to remain unchanged by every storm that passes through your life. When your peace no longer depends on winning every argument or controlling every outcome, your actions become clearer, your decisions become wiser, and your presence begins to influence others without force. Perhaps that is what true mastery has always been. Not the ability to make others surrender, but the ability to remain fully yourself when the world invites you into unnecessary conflict. The ancient Taoists were never searching for better ways to defeat opponents. They were discovering something far more remarkable, a way of living in which the need for opponents slowly begins to disappear. There comes a quiet moment when you begin to notice that many of the battles consuming your life no longer exist outside your own mind. The argument ended days ago, yet it still echoes within you. The fear of failure keeps demanding a fight, even when no one is standing in your way. The need to prove yourself follows you into every conversation, every decision, every dream. It is easy to believe the world is asking for constant struggle, but sometimes the struggle has simply become a habit. The Taoist masters never promised a life without difficulty. Rivers still encounter stones. Trees still bend beneath fierce winds. Seasons still pass through harsh winters before returning to spring. Nature has never confused peace with the absence of challenge. Instead, it reveals something far more reassuring. Life continues because it moves with change, rather than exhausting itself trying to resist it. Perhaps that is why true strength feels so different from the version we are taught to admire. It does not announce itself. It does not need an audience. It has no interest in collecting victories that leave the heart restless. Quiet confidence does not come from defeating another person. It comes from discovering that your peace cannot be taken away by disagreement, disappointment, or uncertainty. When you stop treating every obstacle as an enemy, something remarkable begins to happen. A difficult conversation becomes an opportunity to understand instead of a contest to win. A setback becomes a new direction rather than a personal defeat. Even failure loses much of its power because it is no longer seen as proof that you are inadequate. The world has not become easier. You have simply stopped carrying the unnecessary weight of fighting everything it places before you. This is the meaning hidden beneath the image of flowing water. It never abandons its nature, yet it never demands that reality become something else. It moves with patience, adapts without losing itself, and quietly transforms everything it touches. Its power is not found in domination, but in unwavering presence. Over time, that presence accomplishes what force never could. The same possibility exists within every human life. You do not need to control every outcome to live with purpose. You do not need to win every argument to preserve your dignity. You do not need to overcome every person who disagrees with you to discover lasting confidence. The deepest freedom arrives when your sense of self is no longer built upon victory over others. In that state, success begins to look different. It is measured less by what you conquer, and more by what no longer has the power to disturb you. Anger still appears, but it no longer commands your actions. Fear still whispers, but it no longer decides your direction. Conflict may still exist around you, yet it no longer becomes the place where your identity is tested. Perhaps this was the Taoist secret all along. Winning without fighting was never about finding a clever way to defeat an opponent. It was about reaching a place where the need to create opponents quietly disappears. And when there is finally nothing left inside you that must always resist, defend, or conquer, you discover a victory that no one can give you and no one can take away. A life that moves with the world instead of against it. As calm and enduring as water finding its way to the sea.